Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses to the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. So this week I'm going to be making a wrap dress, and it's going to be this Butterick pattern. And I picked it because I like the collar. I like how it's just a simple wrap but with a little collar peeking out like that. And we've got two different dress lengths, two different sleeve lengths. I'm going to be going this one with a longer skirt length, shorter sleeves. I'm just comfortable with that kind of a put together look. So the only thing that I can see right now on this pattern that I know I'm going to be changing, actually two things. First of all, on these sleeves, there's an armband. If you've been around, you know I've got big upper arms, so I know I'm going to be modifying that band so that it works well with my big arms, because no one wants a really tight band right there. And the other thing I can see is that it does have bust darts that are coming straight up, and I know I'm going to have to lower mine, but that's going to be an easy fix that I will show you. I still need to pre-wash my fabric, but I'm going to show it to you before I take it down to the washing machine. It is just a cotton fabric. It's thicker than a calico, but not as thick as a canvas, kind of that mid-weight. But you know, look at that. How fun is that? It's just one of these clearance ones. If you can see, I do serge the edges, the cut edge of my fabric before I put it in the washer and dryer, just so it doesn't fray everywhere. I find that helps me. And if I pre-wash several things at once and then put them away, I always know what I've already washed because it has a serged edge. So there's that. And when I wash it, I do wash it in hot. I dry it on high heat until it's 100% hot and dry, just because I want to get all of the shrinkage and everything like that out of the way first. So I'm going to run downstairs, throw this in the machine, and then get started unpacking this pattern envelope, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so welcome to the next day. I've got my fabric washed and I'm cutting out my pattern. And the first thing I wanted to show you is for the sleeve, you have one piece, but right here where the bullseye is supposed to be the widest part of your bicep. And I'm doing my size 16 like normal, and it's showing that my sleeve is 18 inches at that point, which is fabulous. That's going to work well for me. So I'm not going to be making any sleeve modifications. The only thing is that this is the same pattern piece for the short sleeve and long sleeve, but for my view, I'm just going to cut it off right here. Okay, so got my pieces in general cut out. Now for the length, remember I'm doing the longer version, and in general, my legs are shorter than their standard. So I want mine to fall, you know, similar to where it's falling on this model. And if you look down here at the bottom under finished garment measurements, I'm going to take my size and bring it down to finished length from back of neck is 46 1/4 inches. So what I do is put a little clip here at 46 1/4 inches, hold this up to the base of my neck, and see where that falls. And I can tell you, I want to shorten my overall skirt length by 4 inches. Okay, I think that that's going to fall a lot closer to where I want. So on both my skirt front and back, they're pretty much the same. It's like it's not a circle, but it is curved on the bottom here. So I'm pretty much just going to put a little measure, something to draw with here, and just put little marks at 4 inches. all the way across and then come and cut that off. And that way I can retain that little bit of curve that's on the bottom of the skirt. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for both my skirt front number 10 and my skirt back number 11. Time to work on this front bodice piece here. And, you know, every body is different, but I'm going to show you the alterations I'm going to make it work for me. So first of all, gravity has had her way with me. So my apex, you know, I am not as optimistic as I used to be. I'm about an inch lower from the fullest point of my bust here being here. So I'm going to need to lower that by an inch. But just because of the style of this dress, reaching for the pattern here, and the way that it needs to fit and everything, and knowing my body shape, I think that I want to lower everything here by an inch. And I think that that's going to work better for me. So I need to figure out a way to make that work. And so what I've done is, you can see I have a little grid here on my table, and I've lined up the grain line of my pattern piece with the grid. Right here, you can tell where the pattern is coming at a slope and then it goes straight down. I'm going to draw a line straight across where it is coming straight across like this. Okay, I need to make sure I lower this whole bust part. So I'm going to draw a line straight up from this point, which is, you know, a little less than half an inch from where my dart line is here. Once I get above where that point is, I can come over. As long as you're beyond it, I don't know that it matters too much how far you are. And then can come down right here. Okay, I want to make sure the dart line for mine is this one. So I actually cut it a little farther away than I needed to here, but that's okay. I need to bring this line up this side of that dart. So right about there looks good. Okay, now I also want this line to be able to anchor and pivot with the changes I'm going to make. So just to kind of walk myself through it, because, you know, I've never done this pattern before, but hopefully the principle will remain the same. Where this is coming straight down, I want to keep that position. Okay, so that's why I'm cutting it there. And then I'm going to come straight up here, straight over here, and down almost to the bottom here. I want to leave just a little bit of paper attached to work like a hinge. So, you know, about 1/8 of an inch or so is attached to there. All right, get this lined back up here. I'm going to put a weight there and a weight up here. Okay, so if I wanted to lower this whole thing by an inch, it would be down here, but I can't right now because that's pulling it. So what I'm going to do, and I think this is going to work here, is I need to give myself a little bit of flexibility here. So I'm just going to draw a line where I'm below these dots. Okay, there's these little dots for the tie belt. And from this line over. So again, I'm going to leave a little hinge. This is just slightly at a diagonal so that I can have some flexibility to move it. Okay, so I have a little bit of a hinge left there. Move you out a bit. So now, if I can, I want to lower this by an inch. So up here, this line is at the inch. This down here is an inch lower here. This here is coming off at an angle, and that's okay. Now you can see it's all shifted that way a little bit, and that's just because this side is keeping it attached, so it's going to be that way. I need to get a piece of scrap paper in here before I do too much else, because I need to start taping things together. So this is just a little piece of tissue paper from where I was cutting out my pattern. So pushing this down so that it is an inch lower here, okay? While I am holding that together, I want to retain this angle. So I'm gonna put a little piece of tape right there. Okay, so that angle is good. Now that that is done, I have two options. I can just tape it this way and extend it over here, but understanding that that is going to be moving my dart out about 1/2 inch. That's okay with me. If that's okay with you, great, follow along the way I'm gonna do it. If you say absolutely not, I can't have my bust dart 1/2 inch that way, what you would need to do is cut this little bit here, move this piece over, and then fill in a gap here. Okay, because that is okay with me, what I am gonna do is come over here, making sure I still have an inch of a gap here. I'm gonna put a piece of tape here to hold that. Up here to hold this. This is another place that I'm going to need to insert a scrap of paper. Come on. I know this sounds really complicated, but it really isn't. It's just a matter of isolating what works and moving what doesn't, okay? We want to make sure the side seam stays the same, because if we extend the side seam, it won't match up to the back piece, and that's no good, okay? So, all right, so we've got this here, and then it's fairly easy down here to match up the difference. So I'm just going to put a little piece of tissue paper here. This is ending up on a grid line here, so I can make sure that that's going to be easy to match. So I'm just going to tape this little piece here. Come on. Okay. So now, since I can see that this point is on a grid line, and I can see where this line ends, I'm just going to extend that bottom line here. Bring this, actually, I need it to be at this point here. Remember, I stopped. This pattern comes at an angle and then straight down, okay? The height that it goes straight down is 1.25 inches. That's how tall this is, 1.25 inches. And I put a little mark at the top. I'm going to put my ruler up here at the top of that 1.25 inches and find a place where I can just kind of blend it in. So it's going to be more like that. So let me bring you up here. And that is how I am lowering my bust dart point, but also giving myself an extra inch at the bottom, which comes in very handy for like a full bust adjustment or something like that. Since it's a wrap dress, you kind of have a little bit of flexibility for the side-by-side wrap, but adding it on the bottom is always handy. So then to cut it out, I cut straight up for my 1.25 inches. The line that is blending this, it's just going to come straight up here. I may add some extra tissue paper in this little area here to keep that a little bit more controlled. Okay, so that is this corner. This I'm just going to cut along here and up. And that is it. That's my new bodice front piece. So just rummaging in my trash to get some extra tissue paper that I'm just going to slide in here off camera, tape some more in place so it's a little more robust, and then I can use this piece to cut out my fabric. Okay, there's a couple things I wanted to point out. First of all, the amount of fabric that I started off with was less than what they called for. So I'm not going to be able to get all of my pattern pieces cut from this. Basically, the minor parts, the minor characters, I'm going to do in a broadcloth. I think I have some blue. If not, I'll have white, you know. So I'm going to be doing the front facing, back facing, 2 of the pockets, and my little ties here out of a broadcloth, just because I want to make sure I get my other pieces out of what I have left of this. Now, for the armband, remember, I need to make my armband wider than theirs. And this is going not at the bicep, a little bit lower, but I still want to have it loose enough that I can move my arm freely, okay? Now, if I'm going to measure this, how wide is that? From about here to about there is about little over 13 inches inside where the seam line is. I'm going to want mine probably about 15 inches. I think that's going to give me the space I need, which means I'm going to need to add 2 inches to the width of this. So just know I'm going to cut 2 of these out, but mine's going to be 2 inches wider. Okay, so the last thing I need to cut out is my front facing, and I want to show you I need to make sure my front facing matches my altered bodice front pattern here. I think that's on the camera range there. So if I place it up here at the top and bring it all the way down, you can see that where I added the inch, I still need to do that down here. So the way I'm going to do that is just cut across here like that. And I'm just going to actually use my other pattern as a pattern piece. Get a little piece of tissue paper out of my trash, and so just to make sure everything fits well, I'm going to tape this piece. I know you can't see me, but look, I just got the little piece I cut off. I'm going to tape that onto this piece of scrap paper. Okay, and with this where it needs to end up, placing this so it matches at the bottom, this so it matches at the top. I've got my gap in there. I'm going to go ahead and put tape here, and I'm ready to go ahead and make my new pattern piece. So I'm just kind of blending this down. Because it's a facing, it will work. Trust me, it will work. And from here, I'm just kind of blending this here. Okay? Making it work. That's the name of the game. So I need to cut 2 of these, and I'm just going to use this blue here for that. Okay, so welcome to the next day. I need to get started with this front bodice piece here. And so I'm pulling the pattern off because first thing I need to do is put a whole bunch of marks on the inside. And of course, I have it folded so the outside is visible. So I'm going to show you on one. And like usual, what I do on this one, I'm going to do with the other. So we have a dart, and remember I moved my dart down, which I think is going to be fine, and I'm going to punch out, there it is, I couldn't find my leather, punch out my circles. Now, if you buy one of these, fabulous, fabulous, get a thick piece of leather. This is a coaster, okay, but you need something thick that your punch will not go through. Just, you know, a heads up there. But the way that I mark all of my circles is I put my leather underneath my tissue paper and then punch straight down, and it cuts that little circle out, okay? So then I can come back and with a heat erasable pen, just draw through there, and it marks it out for me. Now, if you're using a busy fabric kind of like that, I usually draw a big bullseye around it, and that way it's easier for me to find. So I'm going to go ahead and punch out the other 2 circles on the bottom of my dart. Over here there are circles for my tie, and up here there's a circle for a sleeve matching position. And over here there's another circle, and I think that that is for collar placement. So lots of circles to punch out and mark. I'm going to do that with my system, and I will be right back. So once all of those little circles are marked, and I did just clip my notches in, you know, just clipping them in about 1/4 inch, it's going to be fine. I need to draw the line for my dart because I want to be able to see where I am going here. And this is a woven that is not lined, so of course I am going to eventually be serging around each and every piece, but I want to get this dart put in first. So with those lines there, it's going to make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to start down here at the bottom, put my pin down in the first dot, let it come up, and the second dot, okay, push that together. Come up here where that tip is and pinch that, and then that's going to give me the crease that I need, so I can put a couple other pins here. And when I sew this, I am going to be starting it from the outside and sew all the way up. This is a pretty substantial cotton, so yes, I will be backstitching it. If you don't think that you can backstitch really carefully and you're going to get extra bulk up there from your backstitching going off, well, by all means, just go straight off the edge and then hand tie it. That's the technical good way to do it, but for me, for a regular garment, backstitching at the tip of my dart is just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and get both of these darts sewed. Okay, so now that that is sewn in, I'm over here at my ironing board, and I need to press this dart towards the pointy side of the wrap, okay? On my ironing board, there is a little bit of a curve over here. I'm putting it so that the tip of my dart is out that curve. That's going to give me a place where I can actually press this well, this way. And as I iron it, hopefully my iron is hot here, my marks from my heat erasable pen are going to just disappear. Once I have, and I'm only erasing these dots, the rest of it I'm not ironing so that those dots will stay intact. Once I have this pressed, I'm going to go ahead and serge all the way around this piece, and I'm serging it so that this is just a single layer here. If I serged it before and then made the dart, I'd have a lot of bulk right here with multiple layers, you know, but just by doing it once like that, that's going to be great. So let me go ahead, press both sides, serge all the way around both. I thought I would take a couple minutes, since this is an oddly shaped piece, and go through how I serge, and just in case you haven't seen it before, because my thought on serging around edges is that I want to retain as much of the original fabric size and shape as possible, but overcast it so that it's not going to fray. All right, and so there's a certain way that I do that, but one other thing I wanted to point out, I don't think that it says so on the pattern, but I'm using, you know, a fairly well-behaved fabric here. If you're using one that does not want to behave, you know, it's very rebellious, make sure that this long diagonal swoopy part of your front bodice is reinforced either by a row of stay stitching, a fused on piece of stay tape or tricot tape or something, because you don't want this to stretch out of shape, because then you're, you know, going to get a bunch of gaping and everything in that front area, which is always not beautiful. So let me go ahead and get this set in. Again, I'm going to set it so that I'm not cutting anything, at least hopefully not cutting anything, okay? And I'm just going to run it so that the edge of my blade is just barely skimming the outside edge of my fabric. Do to the other side so you can see a little bit better. And yes, I'm just using a 1980s vintage serger. It's fine. So I'm going to come up to this corner until my needle is past where the fabric is, okay? So I'm just going to go nice and slow here. Okay, there, it's past the fabric. At this point, I'm lifting up the presser foot, turn the entire piece of fabric, put the presser foot back down, and continue on this way. Okay, and doing it that way, I can keep that nice sharp little corner. You know, you don't have to worry about extra threads just hanging off everywhere. It does a really good job, all right? So that's for outside corners. And coming down this diagonal, I want to make sure I'm not stretching it at all. If anything, sorry about my camera. If anything, I'm trying to feed it in a little bit extra so it doesn't want to stretch at all. Okay, and again, I'm getting, don't know what that was, I'm getting to the point where I have a tiny little outside corner here. So even though it's at a diagonal, I'm coming until my needle is off the edge, okay? And then with the needle up, lift it, turn it, come down, okay? And here's another outside edge. So let me keep going with that, and I'm not sure if this, hang on a second, let me set this down. As far as an inside corner, this doesn't really have one. It has this little swoop. So I'll show you on the swoop because where the armhole is, because it's basically the same process. Coming over this dart here, I'm just pushing it down so it's flat. If there's a tiny bit that's not in alignment there, I'm going to cut that tiny bit out of alignment off and just keep going. Okay, so at this point, that's what my serged dart looks like in the bottom. So this is just a curved armhole, but pretend it's a squared off inside corner, okay? What I would do is open this up so it's as flat here as possible. If I have a little pleat here, that's okay. I'm just gonna try to keep it out of the way and just go straight across, all right? So because this is a curve, yeah, it's kind of the same thing. But that is it. And that's how I serge around everything. So when you hear me say it over and over, that's what I am talking about. So I'm going to get ready to sew my back bodice pieces on. And I can hear it because I've read the comment over and over. Didn't I just serge off and cover up my notches? Well, yes and no. I did cover them, but I tend to keep my pattern piece somewhat handy as I'm working on that part. And if I just glance over, I say, oh, there's 2 notches in about that position, then it's pretty easy for me to go, okay, I've got 2 notches in here, look through my serging, and I can say, oh, okay, I see one here, I see one here. You know, that's how I do it. If I serged it and clipped it after, that doesn't work for me because then that clips those serging threads and things start to come out, and that's just no good. So that's enough about that. Let me go ahead and get my bodice back piece out here. And before I go sewing it to my front, again, there's a dot here, dots here, a back dart I'm going to need to make. So let me go ahead and get all these dots marked on the wrong side, all the notches clipped on the outside edge, and I will be right back. I want to show, in addition to those marks, I am marking where my center back is up here, just, you know, little dotted line. And I'm marking where my center back is down here, because that is always handy, you know, just drawing a little dotted line like that. So just like for the front, after I have this done, where's my ruler? Here it is. The first thing I'm going to do is play connect the dots with my dart in the back. And no, I did not have to lower my dart in the back because my shoulder blades don't sag. Only the fronts of the shoulder blades seem to sag. You know what I mean? So the back piece can stay as it is without alterations here. So let me go ahead, pinch up, you know, and mark these, get them sewed from the outside all the way up, and then serge all the way around this after I have pressed it. We're going to be pressing these darts towards the center, okay? So once you have your dart sewn in, just like the front, pressing that little flap that you cannot see towards the center part on both sides like that. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so I got that done. Got my darts pressed towards the inside, serged at the bottom. I had to go and adjust my serger tension. I had been using it for satin and lace and things, and I had the tension all screwy. So, I think we're back to normal now. So what I'm going to do now is sew the arm or the shoulder seams together. Up at the very top here, there is a notch to match. Up here, you want to make sure at that 5/8 inch point, the edges are matching up, okay? If this one sticks out a little bit above that, ignore it. It's at that seam line that you need to make sure they match up, okay? You can see what I'm talking about there. Don't worry about this. Worry about this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get both of these stitched on at the top, and then their instruction says after that stay stitch this big diagonal part. So I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, so those are done. I've pressed these seam allowances open. Okay, and so now I'm going to go ahead and do the stay stitching, which I'm going to do at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, slightly smaller than my 5/8 for my stitching line. Starting down here, just coming up all the way around and back down this way. So again, this is a very well-behaved cotton woven fabric. If you are using something that is not behaving well, technically the best way to do it is to start at the back, come down this way, and then start at the back and come down this way. That way, both of the fabrics are going to be acting the same way underneath your stay stitching, okay? For this one, it's not going to do anything, but if it was like a Georgette or one of those crinkle rayons, those god-awful crinkle rayons that I keep using for some reason, one of those kind of things, make sure you go the proper way, which is to start here and go down and start here and go down, okay? Okay, so there's my row of stay stitching. If you can see it, it's there, all right? So I'm just going to put this aside for a minute because I need to work on my collar piece. And I do need to interface my collar, so let me go ahead and grab that. And sounding like a broken record at this point, I'm using the same interfacing I just about always use. Yes, I do own other interfacings. I really do. I own several weights, several types, but this is my favorite. It's also the least expensive, but it does what I need it to do, which is basically keep the shape of the fabric, give it a little extra stability so the threads aren't going to get wonky on me, but not make it too stiff. So that's just what I do. If you like really stiff collars, you might want to do your collar piece out of a stiffer interfacing. I don't. But if you do that, use a lighter weight interfacing when you do the other parts, because they're going to have you put interfacing on the neck facings and things like that. If it was me and you want a stiff collar, I'd use the lighter interfacing for the other pieces. But it's your project. You do you. I'm going to go ahead and fuse my interfacing to my collar pieces. And remember, I ran out of fabric, as you do. So I'm going to have my upper collar in my floral and my under collar in blue. Now on their instructions, I just looked. They don't make it really clear if you're supposed to fuse the interfacing to just one piece or both pieces. In general, you only do it to one. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to be fusing it to my upper collar piece and not to my under collar piece. So just to let you know, that is what I have decided. And while I am here and I have my interfacing out, I'm going to go ahead and grab my other pieces. They're going to want you to interface this armband. I am not going to interface this armband. I don't think it's really necessary, and I want a nice soft little armband, and it's just going to be that wide. I think it's fine. I am skipping interfacing on this. If you want to, please be my guest. But I am going to be putting interfacing on my front facing piece and also my back neck facing piece. And I think that is about it. Okay, so the next part, I've got my interfacing fused here, is to make my collar. Now, what the instructions are going to tell you is to just stitch it at 5/8 of an inch over, down, and over. I'm going to make my life a lot more difficult because I don't want my blue part to be visible from the outside. So there's a couple things I'm going to do. First, I am just going to stitch across this top at 5/8 of an inch all the way across. That's going to be my first step. But I actually want to trim my blue side so it is slightly narrower down here at the bottom, about 1/8 of an inch narrower than the colorful outer side. So up at the top, I'm leaving it as it is, but I'm going to draw a line down here, about 1/8 of an inch in, kind of like that. And pick a scissor of the day here and just trim it along that line first, okay? Once I have that trimmed, then I'm going to go over, and I'm using Rosie, my big old beast of a machine Rosie, to just stitch a single row stitching at 5/8 of an inch up here at the top all the way across. So now that I have that done, my next step is, flip this around, be easier for me. I'm going to trim about half of my seam allowance off, and I'm going to use pinking shears because that way it won't be as obvious from the right side where that cut off seam allowance is. It kind of hides it, you know. Okay, so now that that is trimmed, what I'm going to be doing is understitching this to the bottom. So trying to open this. Come on, fingers. All right, I want my seam allowance to be under my under collar side here, okay? And the blue is my under collar. So with that little pink seam allowance going this way, I'm going to run, let me get a pin here, a row of understitching right along there, just on this side, through all of this stuff, all the way down. Okay, so I've pressed this so it's nice and flat. Now when everything is said and done and this is folded over, it's going to fold it like this. So there's my understitching pulling everything over. So on the outside, it's going to lay nice and flat. None of the underneath is going to be visible. Okay, but for right now, I need to make my side seams. So folding this top here, like I want it to end up with everything kind of pushing over that way, I'm going to match up these side edges here and stitch them at 5/8 of an inch from the top all the way down to the bottom on both sides. Okay, so now that that is done, I'm going to come in here and trim off to within 1/8 of an inch of my stitching, a lot of that bulk, and pink this side like that, and do the same thing over here. Now remember, I trimmed my under collar side so that it was slightly narrower, and that's going to come into play here because just like the understitching at the top is going to have everything wrapped towards the underneath, having the sides slightly narrower should do the same thing. So let me flip this right side out. I'm grabbing a chopstick to poke out this little collar here. That looks pretty good. And over here, when I go to iron it, this top edge is going to be really nice and understitched here. And see how it's already starting to kind of want to curl a little bit? Say if I have my centers matched up here and I just go to smooth it out, you'll see that this edge is going to be slightly peeking out there, okay? Actually, it's a little exaggerated there because it's wanting to curl. It's going to be more like this, okay? And that's going to give me a nice look on the outside, have everything safely hidden underneath, I think it's going to be great. So let me go ahead and get this pressed. And once I have it pressed, I'm just going to stitch it straight across here at about 1/4 inch seam allowance across the bottom, just to hold the 2 layers together. Okay, so now that that is done, because of all of my understitching and everything, my undercollar is going to peek out a little bit, which is fine. That's normal. I'm just going to come at this point and just kind of trim everything so it is even with my outer collar layer, like that. That way everything is nice and neat and I can see it well. All right, now let's go ahead and get the bodice back out here because it's time to go ahead and place the collar onto the bodice. Okay, and on the back, center back inside, I marked where that is. It's a very busy fabric, so I'm just going to stick a pin out here where I can see where that center back is. And I'm going to do the same with where this dot is right here. Just kind of stick a pin so I can see that location easily, because very busy, very, very busy. Okay. All right, so I got my front dots, center back. On my collar piece, here it is. I'm going to be placing it on this way. So my visible collar, my visible outside of my bodice. I want to find my center back of my collar. So I'm just folding it in half here. And I'm just going to stick a little pin there right now. Okay. So starting there, place where that goes, and it was the upper part of that pin prick that needs to line up. And on the collar piece, and I did not mark it, unfortunately, there's a circle right here, okay? That circle marks where the collar should match up with the shoulder seam. So I didn't mark it before, but I can see where it is. So I'm just going to put a little line, matching up my center back to that position. And let's just see how close I can get. So matching up that, flip this around here, that little mark with my shoulder seam. Okay, I'm not worrying about all of that right now. Pin it in place, and the edge of my collar should be matching up to this dot here, and it does. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and pin. Ooh, lots of layers there. That into place. Okay, so the space between the shoulder and the front collar, well, that is matching up extremely easily and flat. Very happy about that. This part here, however, you see how that's a pain. We have stay stitching here. So in order to make it flex so it'll fit easier, I'm going to come in here and clip up to about 1/8 of an inch of my stay stitching. And remember, I did my stay stitching at about 1/2 inch seam allowance. So with those cut, now I can line it up so that this is going to lay nice and flat, and at my seam line, it's going to be laying nice and flat, okay? So I need to pin this also. So what I just did on this side, I did from my center back over there, I'm going to do the same thing from my center back to the front here. Okay, so at this point, I have it so it's all pinned on nicely, and the instructions say to baste. I don't actually want to machine baste this, I'm just going to do it by hand. And that way I can see that I'm, getting everything nice and flat. I'm going to be basting it along that same 1/2 inch seam allowance stay stitching that I did earlier, because then when I come back to sew it at the 5/8 of an inch, nothing's going to be, sticking out or visible. Okay, so I wanted to show you, I've just pinned it up here on the dress form, get her a little bit closer here. And, you can see how the collar is going to kind of lay. You can see kind of how the bodice is going to lay. I just have the side seams pinned together, So far, it's looking pretty cute. I'm liking it. The collar in the back, it was a pretty high piece, but that gets folded in half. So If I lift this up, you can see where that blue is. Anyhow, I need to get started working on the little ties. They're just very long tubes that you flip right side out. So let me go get those out. Okay, so there's two straps on this dress. They're both the same width. The longer one is for the left side. The shorter one is for the right side. They have it split up into making them at two separate times. I'm going to do them both at the same time and get it over with. So basically, I have two ties. Did I forget to cut one of them shorter? I believe I did. When I cut them out, I just cut two out, the longer length. So what I'm going to do is trim one of them to be the shorter length, which means to trim it right here. Come on now. Okay, so this is an extra piece to fling away, and these are my two lengths. Very basic. What they're going to have you do is fold it in half, and they want you to sew it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm actually going to use my serger, put it at a fairly narrow stitch on my serger, and just go down the edge, because this is going to be a very narrow little string when we turn it right side out. Now the one that is shorter, I'm just going to go straight down. The one that is longer, this could be a pain in the neck to turn right side out, being that long and skinny. So what I'm going to do is find the midpoint here, and I'm just going to stick a pin there, and I'm going to sew it in two separate sections. So like one side, I'm going to basically leave an opening of about, 3 inches or so in the middle that is not sewed together. And over here, sew this side from this point all the way over, this side from this point all the way over. And that way I only have to flip half of it at a time. Let me get them stitched and it'll make more sense. Yeah, so this is my long one. And if you can see, I serged it. A much narrower stitch than I use usually, just to overcast edges. Left a blank space in the middle, which I can trim some of that off for right now, and then the rest of it. And yes, I did leave both ends open. I know one end is supposed to be closed. I will deal with that shortly. And that way I can flip it from the center part. So I'm just using, the regular old wire type loop turner thing, sticking it in the middle, coming all the way down to the edge, and inside the little latch hook you want to get a good amount of thread, kind of the maximum amount that little hook will hold on to. So I have it popping back up here at least a 1/4 inch down, okay, because you don't want it to just pull a couple threads and then have it fray out. And like usual, getting it started is the hardest part. So, yep, it did come out of my hook. I will try it again here. But once I can get this pulled right side out, just humor me while I do this 10 or 20 times, then I can go ahead and iron it. And when I iron it, that's when I will fix my little end so that it's nice and square like that. So I've got it turned now, and the ends are not beautiful, so I'm just going to stick my little chopstick up here to try to push that end out so it'll be at least nice and flat and open on each side. And I need to press this, so I'm going to start on one end, press it all the way through. When I get to this center part, I'm just going to kind of tuck things in so it's going to look right. I'll have to close this up, obviously, but trust me, only having to flip half of this at a time is a whole lot easier than doing it all at once and then not having to close this. So let me go over to the ironing board and press this, and I'll be right back. Okay, so over here at my ironing board, first let us deal with closing up this part in the middle, wherever it went to. Where is that opening? Here it is. Okay, so as you can see, well, no, that wasn't it. This is it. I've pressed everything flat. This is not going to be under any tension to pull it apart. And because I don't have any stitching done down the sides anywhere else, I am going to use my favorite friend, Stitch Witchery, to seal this up closed. For a cotton, for this purpose, I think that's going to be just fine. So I'm just tucking a little narrow piece of it in there and sealing it up. Okay. And I'm actually going to do the same thing to the very ends. Okay, so here is this. It's not going to come open. It's fine. And for an end, I'm just going to tuck everything in, put a little wad of Stitch Witchery in the middle. Do this side because it doesn't have a tail sticking out. And then iron it so I end up with a little squared off edge. It's going to be fine. I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so back over here, I'm going to get my left tie, which is the longer one here. And this is my sealed up end. This is my raw end. Okay, up here, this is my front. Swoopy part comes down. And right here, I have 2 dots that I have transferred over. Matching up the raw edge of my little tie with the raw edge of my fabric and bringing it, cannot see that, okay, the raw edge of my fabric, the raw edge of my tie, bringing it so it's right in between those 2 dots. I'm going to pin it here. Okay, so this left tie, going to get basted right here. I'm going to go ahead and do the right one also so I can baste both of them at the same time. So on this side also there are these 2 dots, and I'm going to do the exact same thing where I put the raw edge of my tie against the raw edge of my fabric, line up my tie right between those 2 dots, and I'm going to baste it in place, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got those basted into place, which should hold for now, and I need to fold this together so that I can match up the side seams. So let me just carefully go ahead and pin the 2 side seams together on both sides. This is my back, my bodice back, and even though this is on my right, when I wear it, this will be my left side. This is going to be my right side. This side over here, I'm just going to stitch at 5/8 of an inch all the way down. Okay, this side, I'm going to stitch down to this dot. There's a couple dots right here. Okay, back tack, anchor it in, and then below it, there's another dot from that dot to the edge. So I'm going to be left with a little opening about the size of my finger that I can slide that little string through that we just made. So let me go ahead and get these both stitched, and when I'm done, I'm going to press those seam allowances open. Okay, so that is done, pressed open. So here's my little opening here, all right? What I need to do is come back and stitch about 1/4 inch away from that opening, all the way around it. So I'm kind of marking where that opening is, putting a little mark down below there so I have somewhat of a stitching line to follow as I'm working. You know, I'll square it up better. I'm going to go ahead and stitch all the way around that. That's going to keep the seam allowances open nice and flat and give a little more support to this one. So when I'm pulling my tie, it's not going to want to pull open. Okay, so we are going to get started on the sleeves, and we are doing sleeve B. Sleeve A is longer with a big cuff, sleeve B is shorter. Stuff we need to transfer over, 3 dots, some notches here, but there's also dots down here, and these are marking where gathering stitches are going to be needing to go. So like always, let me go ahead and get that marked out first. Also, like always, before I lose track of everything, I'm going to mark a big letter B in the corner of the back side, okay? So I can keep it straight. So this is the back, this is the front. The back has 2 notches, the front has 1 notch, okay? So that is clear. Then I can go ahead and make sure that I have everything lined up here and just color in all of my dots. I've already clipped my notches, so we are good to go. First thing I am going to do is serge around both of my sleeves even before I start doing my gathering stitches. Hello and welcome to the next day. So I've got my sleeve piece here. I've got it serged around the edge. And just to see how things are going to look, I got my band here, my sleeve band, and remember I extended it 2 inches wider than what the pattern called for because, you know, big girl arms here. So I wanted to see how much gathers I would actually have, and it's not going to be a whole lot. You know, I'm going to be gathering that much in, which is fine. I would rather have fewer gathers and have it be comfortable around my arm than not, you know. So with that, I'm going to stick my little band pieces aside here for a moment, and I need to put some gathering stitches here. So on the sleeve, there are notches on both sides, and then there's a dot up on the top. I need to find my notches here. But I need to put my gathering threads from notch to notch. There's dots here, but my gathering threads are actually set lower, okay? 2 of them. The first one at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, the other one in about 1/8 of an inch or so. And then down here on the bottom, there's these 2 dots right here and here. They're in maybe 1.5 inches from each side. Microphone just fell. Hang on a second here. Okay, so they're in like 1.5 inches on each side. I need to put 2 rows of gathering stitches between these 2 dots, also the same spacing. So let me go and do that, and I will be right back. Okay, so I've got my 2 rows, gathering stitches in. If you can see, there they are. And what I need to do now is fold this in half, you know, keeping all of my gathering threads out of the way. Match up the side seam over here and stitch this at 5/8 of an inch and then press that seam allowance open. Okay, so with that done, I've got my armbands here, and I'm not transferring markings over on here right now because really the only thing that there is on this pattern are these dots, and these dots are going to match up with these, just nice and flat. So as long as I get my center seam matched up with the center seam here, it's going to be fine because my pieces are slightly longer by 2 inches, so it just saves me some issues. So what I'm going to do is folding these armbands in half, right sides together. I'm going to go ahead and stitch across here at 5/8 of an inch and then press these seam allowances open. Okay, so over here at my ironing board, obviously, the next step they're going to want you to do is turn this up 5/8 of an inch, press it, and then trim off 1/4 inch of it all the way around so that you only have 3/8 of an inch turned up. To me, that seems like an awful lot of work, and I'm not going to do it that way. I don't mind having a ever so slightly wider armband than what they say. So instead, I'm only going to turn it up the 3/8 of an inch, you know. I don't see the point in turning up 5/8 and then trimming it. So I am drawing a line here at 3/4 of an inch, which is twice as wide as 3/8 of an inch, okay? And I'm doing this on the wrong side of my fabric, and that way I can just turn it up and match my raw edge with that line that I just drew. Ooh, actually, you know what? Where all of this thick seam allowance is here, I'm going to get that trimmed down. So just below that 3/4 inch line, I'm going to trim some of this stuff out. And yes, I do have a selvage edge right there. Okay, that's going to make it a lot easier to deal with. I hope I had that centered on the camera. I didn't even look. So I'm going to fold this up to that 3/4 inch place all the way around, get it pressed, and then just making sure I have it on the right side over here too, because my line's going to erase as soon as I press it. Okay, so that part is done. bringing it over this way, making sure this lines up with that line. And there I go. It is a 3/8 of an inch pressed in hem. So that means that when I go to finalize it, okay, whereas their finished cuff might be something that looks about like that. Mine might look 1/8 of an inch or so lower. That's fine with me, you know? So that's what I'm going to do to this one also. Meet you back at the table. So I'm going to be putting my sleeve onto my cuff. Before I get started, the first thing I'm doing is marking where that center point is between the seams. So here is my center top of my sleeve. Right there. Actually, I need to mark that on the right side. Excuse me for just a minute. Okay, I'm pulling this over here, marking it on the right side of this, so I have a good center point on both my sleeve and my cuff. Okay, so I'm going to, the cuffs are the same, so just pick one, slide my sleeve inside of my little cuff thing, pulling all this up so I have them right sides together, and the first thing I'm doing is matching up this seam here. Okay, once I do that, I'm going to pin it on both sides here, so that the seam allowances are going to want to stay open, nice and flat. Okay, then the next spot that I pin is going to be where these dots are, where these gathering threads start. And that's, like I said, just like 1 inch or so over. And put a little pin at each one of those positions, you know, marking the beginning of all of those gathering threads there. And then the center point. Oh, and make sure that you are gathering the bottom of your sleeve. Because remember, you've got gathering stitches on both the top and the bottom. So it could be easy to, in the midst of all this, get them confused. Make sure that the top of your sleeve, the curvy part like this, is sticking out, okay? Just thought I'd throw that in there, because that's happened to me before. All right, so here's my center point here that I drew, my center point here. I'm just going to get those matched up. And then I'm ready just to start pulling my gathering stitches so that everything's going to lay nice and flat. Okay, so now that I have it, adjust this here. Now that I have it so it's all pinned in, I need to sew it. So for me, because I'm using a flatbed machine, I have it so that my sleeve is on the inside, because I want to look at my gathered part as I sew. And I kind of make it a circle, start sewing here, and I rotate it so I can look at it that way. If you have a free arm machine, I would do it the opposite way, so that whatever is gathered is on the outside, okay, so that you can keep an eye and make sure that everything that you're gathering is behaving. So I'm going to go ahead, sew this. We'll get my little strings all out of the way here. Go ahead and sew this at 5/8 of an inch all the way around. And like I said, because my band is wider, or is longer, my gathers probably won't be as full as what yours might be, but it's okay. It'll look fine. Okay, so I've got that stitched on, as you can see. And so I'm back at my ironing board with my sleeve inside out. And so got a sleeve roll, very handy to have for something like this. Just saying, if you don't have one, you can make one very easily. I have a very old video on that somewhere early on in my catalog on YouTube, so they're fine. They're not difficult to make, as long as there's something absorbent in there. I have sawdust. You can put a roll of newspaper, you know. Sand is not a good option in my opinion, because it doesn't do good things with steam and stuff. But you know, you do you, but they're very handy, as you can see, to be able to press a circular tubular thing. So once I have it pressed with my seam allowance going down, I'm going to fold up my pre-pressed little edge, and I'm lining it up to where that seam line is. Okay, if you can see, there's my seam line, there's my edge. I'm just going to pin it in place like that at a few key points, and then press it again all the way around. I'm pinning this. Another option is you can always just whip stitch it from the inside. I have done that a huge amount of times. You know that if you've been watching me for a while. I just don't feel like it today. I almost forgot my final and what is probably my favorite way of doing it. Stitch witchery. Anyway, instead of pinning it, put stitch witchery in here, fuse it in place, and it's going to be exactly where you want it. You know what? I am going to do it that way for this one. Let me grab a piece, because it's good to have it handy. And get this folded down. Okay, make sure that this side is at my seam line where I want it. I still want this to be exactly where I want it. Okay. And before I actually put the stitch witchery in here, I'm going to give it a quick press just so it gets used to its new home. Like that. Okay. So now that that is in, grab a piece that's the right length. And this is that 1/2 inch wide stuff that comes from the 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐞.com website catalog. I love that. I like it better than the really wide one. It just seems to be a handier size. Okay, so then I can tuck that in, all right, and press it. And when I go to sew it on the outside, I can know for a fact it's going to be secure here. So then when I'm stitching it on the outside, say I want my edge stitch an 1/8 of an inch in, I could just base it off of this and it'll be fine. Let me go ahead and get this side fused on, and I'll actually take you over to Rosie and show you that. If you haven't seen her already, this is Rosie. She is my Singer 24111 from 1945. She is fabulous. I had a great time making her. But I want to show you, if I can get my camera to sit still, the foot I'm going to use, you know, since we're doing fun things. This is a special edge foot, and it's special, SP. Let me turn this light on. Okay, so it is set for 1/16 of an inch. So if I use this foot with its little spring-loaded guide here guiding me, I will get an exact 1/16 of an inch seam line, which is very fun. We do like that precisionness when we don't have to think about it. And that's the thing is that feet like this do, they let it be more automatic than having to think about things. It's not necessary at all, but it is fun. So like I mentioned earlier, when I'm using a flatbed, oops, my light just went off. When I'm using a flatbed machine, I sew so that I'm looking inside of a cylinder. So I have my right sides here, and this is the edge of my little cuff there. So I'm going to set down my little guide on my foot so you can see it. Well, the battery on my camera light just died, so I'm going to see if I can get you in close enough that just the sewing machine light can work here. So looking at the right side, because remember this has the stitch witchery on it, so it's not going to go anywhere. I can just let this guide run along that edge. And then on the back side here, you can see, I know I'm very close, sorry about that. My stitching is going to be just at that set amount all the way across. I'm going to say I don't regret not putting interface on the band. If you want to do it, be my guest. It just doesn't bother me to have a softer band, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so there we go, all the way around. And you can see that is pretty easy. And it gives a nice finish, okay? Okay, so with that done, we're going to put the sleeves onto the dress. So here is my bodice. This is obviously my front. This is my back. Here's my armhole opening. And I'm going to take a sleeve, lay it here, and I want to make sure that I have the front on the front side. And this, you can tell it has 2 notches. It's got my letter B. This is the back side. I need one with the front side there, so that is the wrong sleeve. Let me grab this one here just to double check. And yes, this only has 1 notch on that side. This has 2. It has the letter B. So this is the correct sleeve for this armhole. So I'm going to stick it underneath here and match up that, I lost my pins, match up this seam down here at the bottom. I'm just going to grab a clip. And then the next thing is up at the very top. There's a dot on your sleeve, and the top center dot, that goes up here where the shoulder seam is. Pop that on there. Okay, then the notches on the armhole match up with the notches on the sleeve. So right here is the back ones. And come on, so many gathering threads, you know. And right here is the front one. So that matches up. Now there's also dots. So where are you, dot? I think I ironed off my dot in the front, which is not good. I have a dot right here on my sleeve. I need to find where that dot is, but there is one on the back. So that's good. We'll just use that for an example. I'm going to take the dot from my sleeve here and bring that all the way up and match up with the dot on my bodice, which is right here. And that's where most of your gathering is going to be. So let me go ahead, get my pattern back out and draw this dot that I erased in here somewhere, and find my pin so I can start pulling threads and gathering this. Okay, I actually had to take a quick break, charge my microphone and my light, and I'm back. And while I was waiting for that to charge, I went ahead and I sewed on one of my sleeves. But I want to show you, this one is all pinned up. So that's about how many gathers we've got going on. And what I'm going to do is sew it starting where one of my notches are. Go all the way around. Okay, at 5/8 inch. When I hit that point where I'm going to overlap it, I'm going to come in about 1/8 of an inch and put a second row up to the point where the other notch is. So this bottom area is going to have 2 rows of stitching up at the top, just one at 5/8 inch, which hopefully you can see over here in the top. It's just the 1 row right there. Come down here in the bottom. And there are 2 rows, if you can see there on that color, you can kind of see. And then what I did is where I have the double row of stitching, I put some little clips, so this is going to be able to be more flexible and comfortable. And I clip it so that I have about 1/8 of an inch between the tip of my clip and my second row of stitching. You know, that way it's going to be flexible, but I don't have to worry about it ever getting somewhere where it doesn't need to be. So let me go ahead and get this sleeve sewed on the same way, and I'll be back. I want to show you what it looks like right now. It's kind of giving me the cute little sexy 1940s type look. Honestly, I think it's actually really cute. I need to take a break. I got some people that are going to be stopping by soon, and I don't want to get in the middle of the next step. But yeah, this is her. Got her little tie on this side. I think she's looking rather adorable. So next time we're going to get started on the skirt. Okay, it's actually been a couple days. I had to get some stuff done. So we are on page 3 of 4 of the instructions, which is the skirt. And it looks like they're going to have us start with the skirt bag, which has a couple darts. So let me grab that. And I am aware we have not done the facing yet. That comes later, apparently. The skirt back was cut on a fold, and the skirt front is 2 separate pieces. So, like usual, I am going to mark my dart just like I did on the bodice pieces, you know, punching them out, drawing the line and everything. I have dots over here that I need to mark. That's for an inseam pocket. That's a good thing to mark. Notch here, which is good for pocket placement. So let me get that done. You've seen me mark things before, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I've got my darts marked and drawn, connecting the dots there to make my little V-shaped lines. So, get that off of there. Actually, this is a nasty pin. Let me just throw that pin away. There comes a point when pins are not salvageable. Okay, sticking my pin down one dot and back up the next dot. And over here, pinching this, just like I did with the front, you know, making sure I have a nice crease there, putting a few pins, and I'm going to do this for the other dart on the other side. When I sew it, as usual, I'm going to start at the outside, come all the way up to the tip. So let me get those two darts put in. Once they are in, I need to run over to my ironing board and press them. And you can see that they want you to press them going towards the center back, okay? So that little flap was going to go towards the center back that way, okay, on both sides. Okay, so I've got my darts in, and after I put them in, I pressed them both towards the center, and then I came back and I serged around the edge, like I normally do. And again, I serge after I put the darts in, that way it's less bulky up here. Okay, so I believe what I'm going to need to do is get my front piece out. There are two front pieces, and there is not a dart in the front piece. At least it doesn't look like it on the picture. So instead of putting in a dart, I'm just going to go straight over and serge around both of my front pieces. Okay, so at this point, with both my front and my back serged around, and I have the little dots for my pocket. Here they are, on both my front and my back pieces. So before I can sew them together, I need to prepare my pockets. And if you remember, I ran out of fabric, so I have 2 pockets out of the fabric for the dress and 2 out of the blue. And I'll show you how I'm going to make that work. But first of all, I'm going to go ahead and serge all the way around all 4 of these pocket pieces. So I have serged them all, pressed them, and we're ready to go. So this is my thinking. If, say, you have your hand in your pocket, or the pocket opening is open a little bit for some reason, usually what you see in that gap is the back pocket piece. And because of that, I am going to be sewing the ones that match my fabric to my skirt back. The ones that are in my contrasting fabric are going to go on the front. You know, if these show, if someone is standing behind you and happens to catch a glimpse of it, I don't think that's a big issue. But, you know, it's just a design choice. If you really want to highlight the contrast color, then put that in the back, you know. Okay, so this is a skirt front, and I am looking for my dots. Here they are. Okay. I am going to be getting a blue one here, and I actually have not placed my dots on here. Oh my goodness, let me go ahead and get my dots marked onto my pocket pieces. So I want to show you lining up my dots. The top edge of my pocket exactly lines up with the top edge of my skirt. So instead of overly stressing about sticking pins through circles in pockets and all of that, I am just going to line up my cut edges up here at the top and all the way down. I'm going to do that on all 4, making sure the right sides are together. And then I'm going to be stitching this at, you know, around a 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We want it to be a lot narrower than the final 5/8. These dots are at 5/8. You want your seam to be about half that width. Okay, so top to bottom on all 4 pockets. So with the blue on the fronts and the matching on the backs. All right, so I got them sewed on, and after I sewed it, I pressed the pocket going out with all the seam allowances underneath the pocket area, okay? And then, just for funsies, the instructions did not tell me to do it, but I wanted to. I came back and understitched this. It's just going to help it lay better, and I just felt like doing it. So basically, with all the seam allowances under the pocket, you come back and just do an edge stitch just barely this side of where that line is, okay? So I have have all 4 of my pockets pressed and understitched. So this is one of the fronts, and what I do for this side, I'm going to do for the other also. Here's my front. I'm going to put my back on top of it, so I have right sides together. And the way that I'm going to be stitching this and matching everything up is, first of all, I'm just going to pin this together up here at the top. I want to make sure that these 2 seam lines are matching up exactly. This up here held together right now. I'm going to actually go ahead and match up the bottom of my pocket too, where those 2 seam lines meet. I want to make sure that that is perfect. So let me go ahead and stick a pin right over here. I want you to start out here, come around at 5/8 of an inch. Now remember, we have a dot up here. I'm going to go ahead and redraw it because when I ironed everything, it did disappear. So I have here and here, okay? And you can see when I put this on, my dots are set in. I just drew the line where they are on this side of where I put my seams. It's this position I want, not this position, okay? So I can see where my stitching line is here. I am going to want to sew this, and my original seam was at about 1/4 inch. So I want to sew about 5/8 of an inch from the cut edge here, right here. Let me take that pin out because it's giving me issues here. Okay, so from the top to where this dot was, you know, height-wise, this is my stitching line from where I sewed my pocket in. I have a nice big gap there. I want that big gap. I don't want to come anywhere near that other stitching line. Okay, putting a couple pins there just to hold it. Out here, starting up at this point, at 5/8 of an inch, and I'm going to pin my pocket edges together better, all the way around, coming back up, and again 5/8 of an inch from the cut edge over here, okay, where this line intersects with this line, which is where this dot was. That's the point I'm aiming for. So when I'm coming around 5/8 of an inch, once I get to this gray area, I want to make sure these seam allowances on both the top and bottom layer are still pointing towards the pocket. Okay, that's important. And I want to aim up at that spot there. Okay, once there, leave the needle down, rotate everything, and continue all the way down at 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so that's this part, and then here and down. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and I'll be right back. So, front, back. I want my pocket to be towards the front, but I also want to press my seam allowance open. So basically, I'm going to get it started pressing it open here. When I get up to right below this pocket, where it's flicking in like that, I'm going to clip just this back seam allowance just below that pocket up to about 1/8 of an inch away from my seam line. Okay, keep that open, and then the pocket is going towards the front. Okay, so up here at the top, I am keeping my pocket going towards the front, and I'm just pinning it to keep it nice and level, and I'm going to stitch it at about 1/4 inch seam allowance straight across the top here. I think they say baste it in the instructions, but this will work for me, just to keep this pocket going that direction nice and flat. Okay, so this is the outside. I just want to show you what a nice neat pocket that makes. So if I go to open it, you can see that it's folded in a bit, and then that blue starts there, and everything's nice there too. So anyhow, this is doing great. I've got my little pocket basted up here at the top. And now I need to go get my bodice and see if we can join them together. Okay, so I'm going to get started matching this up. So the first thing I'm going to do is match up my side seam of my bodice with my side seam of my skirt. Lots of stuff going on up there in the front. And I'm going to pin on both sides of that seam to keep the respective seam allowances in the position that I want them to end up. Okay, so with that done over here, pin this over on this side, just the same way. Okay, so with those 2 points pinned, if I just kind of fluff it out, everything matches pretty well in between. Excuse me. So because everything's matching really great here, I'm just going to go ahead and pin that together. A few points here. I'm going to pin it also where these darts are, because I want to make sure that the darts are going to stay laying where I want them to be as I am stitching. One thing is, I thought that my darts were going to line up better, but it seems like my bodice darts are about 3/8 of an inch to the outside of where my skirt darts are. So, you know, sometimes on garments, well, on their picture it looks like they line up. Maybe I just need to do some easing to make that work. But on my skirt it's not. And you know what? My pattern is busy enough. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue, because see this, it's matching up perfectly. So don't know, it is what it is. Let me go ahead and try to match up this front. Remember, I did all of those adjustments to my front, so if there is any issue, this is probably where it's going to be. First thing I'm going to do is tuck my little strap to the inside, match up this outside corner. There are notches up here to match up also. And I did clip them, but I just have not looked yet at where they are. I just like to see, if I just pull these two, how is it behaving? And it looks like it's going to behave very well. So that's pretty great. I was thinking that I was going to have to do some easing, but it doesn't look like it. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin this. And then hopefully we're going to stitch this at 5/8 of an inch. Let's see what it says here. Yep, it says 5/8 of an inch. And then after you stitch it once all the way across, they want you to come back and stitch it a second time, 1/4 inch in, so about halfway through that seam allowance. So you'll end up with 2 stitching lines, one at 5/8, one at about 1/4 inch. Okay, it's time to play. Why don't you look at the directions before you sew that, Marie? Because I did something incorrect. And so I am going to be pulling out the stitching probably on both of my fronts to about 1 inch or so beyond where my pocket is. Just going to open that up. So if you're playing along at home, don't sew this yet. So what the problem is that I was so anxious to get this skirt sewed onto my bodice that I skipped the instructions, which are, they want you to hem this skirt and do a little narrow hem down this whole front edge before you sew it onto the bodice. So pretend I haven't sewed anything to the bodice yet. The hem they want you to do is a 5/8 inch hem. Okay, so the easiest way that I do that is turning it up, pressing it 5/8, and then I can just turn in the bottom. I'm going to go ahead, I'll show you at my ironing board, but they also want you to do a narrow hem across the bottom. And I know that when I was sewing straight across, the bottom edges were not matching up exactly. You know, here it's a little more obvious. So before I get started with that, I am just going to blend them together, and no one shall be the wiser when it comes to the point that I'm making that hem. Okay, so I have my hem just kind of pressed at about 5/8 of an inch. What is this? This is the bottom. This is, no. This is the bottom here, which is slightly curved, and this is that front side opening thing. We need to miter these little corners here, so let me see if I can get you in a little bit closer. Alrighty, so where I have this pressed, I just went ahead and drew those lines so that you can see it better. And I want to cut diagonally about 1/8 of an inch above where those lines are. Okay, so I'm just going to come here and cut off my big top. And then fold this down to where that intersection of those lines are. And fold up this side and fold up this way. I'm doing it this way because this is the way it says to do it on the instructions. Now, at this point, I just have my raw edges here, which you can leave if you want to, but what they would prefer you do is make a narrow hem, which means to just tuck those edges under. Well, I'm not too sure where I left my pins, so I'm just going to put a clip right here. It's really odd. Hang on a second. My pins were underneath my dress, as you do. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and get this pinned in place here. Okay, and then tucking this side under also, like so, and get that pinned there. The corners are going to be the most difficult part, so that's why I'm doing them first. Okay, so it's going to give me a nice little, come on, focus, give me a nice little mitered corner like that. Actually, as I'm sewing this, I'm just going to kind of turn it in as I'm going, but getting my little corners all set and pinned ahead of time is going to make my life a lot easier. Okay, so I'm over here back at my sewing machine, and I realized there was something that I wanted to do, so I turn the camera back on, which is where I have these seam allowances when I'm making my narrow hem. I am clipping most of that out so I can see the fold line where I pressed it earlier, and I'm making my clip slightly below that fold line, okay? And taking that amount out, it's going to make it a lot less bulky when I turn it in like that, okay? Oopsie. So, back over here, I had it pressed once, and then as I'm sewing it, I'm just tucking it in. Going a little bit, tucking it in some more. Okay, so here's my pins, here's my mitered corner. I'm going to pull this one out and just use the tip of my pin to hold that down until I get up close enough. And now I can let this one off, and when I get to just the right point, right there, leave my needle down, lift my presser foot and turn it, set her back down, and go a couple stitches to get that row started. And then just finish up the rest of the way. The main thing is you don't want to get your fingers right underneath there, because that is no fun getting stabbed. Okay, so back here at the table now, I need to get my bodice connected to my skirt. So here's the hemmed front edge that I just did. If I look at it this way with the right side of the bodice up, here's my little tie. The skirt is going to be right here, which there was a little dot. I have it on the wrong side. I have it marked with a line. It's 5/8 of an inch in. So if you just want to measure where that is, I can kind of see my line through it so that my blouse is sticking out 5/8 of an inch right here. Okay. So if I stick a pin there, then this is the spot here where I need to get it matched. And it actually is still matching up pretty well. So that's great. I'm just going to go ahead and pin it together, and, you know, same thing as before, 5/8 of an inch stitch there, and then coming in about 1/4 inch and doing a second row stitching so it'll blend with what I already have here. Okay, so once you have all of that sewed on, I'm going to open this up, and I need to go to my ironing board and press this seam allowance up towards the bodice all the way around. Okay, so that's looking pretty cute. Here is the bodice, the skirt. Here's my seam line there, seam allowance pressed up. And I need to leave this for a second because it's time to finally get things going with my facing. So I need to, first of all, make sure that I have them going the right way, which I don't think I do here. This is my back facing piece. So putting that face up and down here at the bottom, it's got this little point there. That little point is going to be going towards the middle, like that, okay? And if I had marked them, I would have notches up here at the top, but I did not mark those, but it's going to be okay. Just make sure you're putting these on the right way. All right, I'm going to put this here. I want to point out, if you're confused which goes which side, the side that has the notches on the inside, that's how it should be. If you are putting your pattern piece and your notches on the outside, that's wrong. Make it that way. So now that I have it sewn together, press these seam allowances open. I need to finish off the outside edge of this. So what I'm going to do is actually start on this side. The outside edge is this outside area out here. I'm going to fold it under, not much, fat 1/8 of an inch, and then just do a straight stitch over that. So it's going to be nice and folded, looking really good from the outside. Okay, so before I start attaching it, I want to find my center back position on the facing. I have it marked on my dress, so that's good. There you go. Let me go ahead and get that center back matched up first. Okay, so this little dotted line, I've got my collar here. This is my back, but this dotted line is my center back of my bodice. Okay, I'm laying it this way, so I have my collar facing up. And I'm going to get my center back of this facing, and I'm going to match that up right there. Okay, so my center back are matched up. So starting with that there, the next point I'm going to match up is my shoulder seam. So I can just line up this seam here with that right there, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and pin it on both sides like I usually do, which may seem like overkill to some people, but it's just what makes me happy. Let me go ahead and pin it over here too, matching this shoulder seam with that shoulder seam right here. Okay. Then from this point, it should match up all the way to this bottom point. Okay, so my facings actually fit well down the front. Glad to see. You should have 5/8 of an inch peeking out down here below this fold, okay, or thereabouts. Now up here behind the neck, you see how that feels like it's way too snug? Well, just like over on this side, I had to make some clips. I should do that over here too. Now they do not have you putting any stay stitching on there, but since I have the interfacing fused on, I'm going to hope for the best and just come across here and put several little clips, only about 1/4 of an inch deep. Again, since I don't have stay stitching, I don't want to go too far, but I need enough that it's going to flex like I need. Okay, so with those there, now look, it's like magic. I can just pin it on and my cut edges are going to line up. So with all of that, I need to stitch this entire facing on at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, just starting at the bottom and working my way around. Now here's the thing. If you are doing this with a really temperamental fabric, just like I was telling about the stay stitching going one way then the other, technically the way you're supposed to sew this on is also starting at the center back, going down one way, starting at the center back, going down the other way. But since my fabric is pretty darn well behaved, I'm just going to go starting down here and working myself all the way around. I want to show you, when I do it, when I sew it, I look at this side because there's more that can go wrong on this side, in my opinion. But when I did that, I got a little bit of a pucker back here in my back neck area. So what I've done is where my pucker was, and I got it on both sides. Okay, I haven't picked this one out yet. I've picked out about 3/4 of an inch worth of stitches, and I am just pulling the facing down a bit. Okay, that's going to give me a little bit of extra room, and then coming back and on this side making that little row of stitching. Okay, so at this point we need to turn everything to its proper orientation, and I'm going to have to press this. I was thinking that I was going to understitch it, but they want us to top stitch this instead of understitching it, so I'm going to do that. But before I actually press this, what I want to do is just double check and make sure everything is good, and then just to take some of the bulk out, especially around this back neck, I'm going to pink out about half of that seam allowance. So coming in here, oh, the pinkies don't want to go over the thick seam allowance. All right, so coming in here, I'm going to take about half of it off, so I'm left with a seam allowance that looks like that. All right, once I top stitch it, it's going to be fine. There's not going to be any issue, but it's going to take bulk out, and it's going to help it be more flexible. Okay, so now that I have that all trimmed, I'm going to go ahead and press this. And what I'm going to do first is just press it flat, and I'm pressing it so my seam allowance is underneath the bodice part. Okay, so once I press it flat, then I'll come back and I'll turn that in and press it again like that, all the way around the neckline and the fronts of my bodice. So while I was going around the neckline, if you have a pressing ham, that might come in handy. It's very, very recommended for pressing around a curved surface to have a ham. So it was pressed flat, and now I'm coming back and I'm just pressing it this way, and I'm putting a little clip, reaching over here for some clips to put on the edge, just to hold it nicely. Taking my time, just doing a little bit at a time all the way around. Actually, I'm not going to worry about behind the collar right now. That'll be another project, because we're only doing the edge stitching, the top stitching, up to this point of the collar. Okay, so I'm going to use my outside edge as my guide. It looks like they want you to do it about 1/4 inch. I might do mine slightly narrower, but just coming up and edge stitching from the bottom. But before I do that, I'm going to get this little piece here tucked in, because that would be a lot neater. So if you can see, I'm just folding this in so that the bottom edge of it is lined up with that stitching line. Okay, and I will pin that in place so that when I do my edge stitching, I'll be going over that while it's already folded. Okay, so I've got that stitching in, and I ended up doing, their 1/4 inch-ish top stitching, because that kind of blends here into the skirt where the narrow hem is. So did that, and at this point, what I also did is I came underneath the collar, and I progressively got narrower and narrower, because this won't be showing, up to the shoulder seam. And I stopped at the shoulder seam on both sides. But I need to get some hand stitching done. Down here underneath, I want to make sure that this facing is not going to be flipping up and getting on my nerves. So I'm going to be stitching it down from the shoulders, and I'm actually going to go ahead and just kind of invisibly stitch it down all the way across here, just, needle and thread, because I don't want it to curl up and stick out and all of those fun things that just get really annoying. And while I have my needle and I am taking care of that, which won't take that long, I'm also going to come down here, clip those threads, and just whip stitch this little bottom edge in so that that will be also secured and look very nice. Okay, so I've got that all stitched down. And see, it's just a little whip stitch. That's going to work, but it's going to hold it down so that I never have to worry about that back facing wanting to misbehave and flip itself out. Because I have the top stitching on here, I'm thinking that the sides are going to be fine. If it turns out that they want to do, you know, that kind of thing themselves, I can always come back and tack those down later. Also, but I think we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and pop it on my dress form and see what she looks like. Do I have volume? Yes, I do. Okay, so cute dress. A couple notes. First of all, I do have a little dressing pen right here, those little bitty straight pins, just to hold it together, you know, because we don't want any of that flashing out. But I honestly don't mind just putting, noisy roosters. I honestly don't mind just putting a little pin in there as I'm getting dressed, you know. Keep them on my table. It's not a big deal. I'm very glad I made my sleeve band slightly wider. I added 2 inches. Oh my goodness. And you can see that if I hadn't done that, it would have been really snug. But, you know, now it's good. I can move around and I have enough flexibility that, you know, gives me that freedom. The wrap, even though there's nothing here holding the skirt layers together, it is a wide enough wrap that even taking a big step, it's not going to want to unwrap and show everything. You know, I'm not flashing any thigh hair. So I like that. The dress does not take a huge amount of fabric just because it is like an A-line kind of skirt and everything. And I think it's classic. I think it looks kind of like a 1940s type fun dress. At least that does to me. But yeah, I like the collar. I like everything about it. So this is a win. Hope you liked it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, 3 ugly city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn, then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses, the view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.